Yes. Does anyone need the next one, Bill?
Oh, yeah.
While you're taking a look at the slides, what you got in front of you is a copy of slides that I gave to the Highlands Council a couple weeks ago when I came to talk to them about the stream monitoring that we've been doing on Ledgewood Brook and the results that we've found, that we've seen to date. So you're going to see the same thing. You're going to hear basically the same information. If you haven't been in front of the Highlands Council before, they only allow you 3 minutes to talk. So you're going to hear the same information a little more slowly. I hope, unless you tell me off after 3 minutes, in which case I'm going to race through. Say again? Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to take questions. Before I even get in, I have not been able to attend at least township committee meetings, but from following them in the press, I've gotten the impression that the council, or at least some of the council, maybe 1 year, it's our 21st year. We're the oldest continuous volunteer stream monitoring network in the state of New Jersey. We use volunteers, but they're what EPA and DEP like to refer to now as citizen science volunteers. They're all trained on EPA and DEP approved protocol. So we use a scientific protocol, we use the same protocol at each site. And the sites, what we're looking at here is biological indicators. So effectively what we're looking at is chronic conditions, clean this in medical terms. If you want a snapshot, if you want to look at acute conditions, you should be looking at chemistry. If you want to look at chronic conditions, you look at biology. We're looking primarily at biology, we're also looking at the habitat. So we're tracking the health of the water, surface water, through this program, throughout our watershed over time. Some of the sites have been there for 21 years. This particular site we established 4 years ago now, so we have 3 years worth of data. In particular because we were concerned about the dump and what impact it either was having or may have in the future on surface water quality in the area. So if you look at this first slide, I apologize if I start going off and saying things that people already know, just smack me so I don't, because you all will understand this much better than the Highlands Council did. But this is a map of the sub-watershed that includes Ledgewood Brook. The yellow dot on that first slide that you're looking at is the location of our monitoring site. It's about 200 meters downstream of the property line to the landfill. You cannot see the dump from here, but if the leaves are off the trees, actually, you might be able to. In the summertime, you can't, but in this time of year, you might be able to. It's close. The primary drainage upstream of this monitoring site is the dump, the 2 streams that come off of that. If you flip the page, it says Water Quality Ledgewood Brook Site number 1, so you'll see in more detail where the site's located. It's just upstream of Ledgewood Pond, and if you look to the left of where the red indicator is there for the monitoring site, the landfill sits on top of where those 2 streams are linking together. So we're about, like I said, about 200 meters downstream of the dump itself. If you look at the next slide, it says Water Quality Ledgewood Brook Site number 1. Angela's been kind enough to chart the water quality for all of our monitoring sites, so we have similar data for all the sites. The older sites, we have a lot more data. This site, we have 3 years worth of data. What you will see here is that Ledgewood Brook for the last 3 years has scored an 18 on the New Jersey impairment score. The protocol that we use, the scoring system that we use is a statewide system called the New Jersey impairment score. If you're not familiar with it, it is a scale of 0 to 30. 0 is dead, sterile, completely devoid of life. 30 is as good as it gets. This is an 18. What that translates to is that means that in terms of this standard, the site is moderately impaired. Now, I'll tell you the same thing I told the Highlands Council. Moderately impaired doesn't sound all that scary, and I'm not sure if that's the message that the Township Council has gotten. Moderately impaired does not sound that scary. The reason I brought the slides is to show you a little bit of context. If I saw a score of 18 way downstream in my watershed, especially in the Piedmont area, maybe in the Neshannock, where we know we have serious impairment, where we have streams that literally go dry during the summer months. If I saw an 18 down there, I wouldn't be terribly surprised. Although we don't have many 18s down there, even down there. If I saw an 18 down there, I wouldn't be surprised. If I see an 18 in the headwaters, I'm in shock. This is it. When I see an 18 this far upstream in our watershed, this tells me we have a very serious problem. A site in the headwaters like this should routinely be scoring between 27 and 30. I'll show you some other similarly situated sites very near here that routinely score 27 to 30. Those are excellent scores. Those are non-impaired scores. Those are what I would expect to see out of this site. And you all are familiar with the area, but you know, we include a photograph of the site so people can visualize, so they can understand what the site looks like. If you look at this site, you can understand that but for the dump upstream, there is no reason this site shouldn't be doing very well, like any headwater stream. If you flip the page, we're going to talk about some sites neighboring Fenimore. The first one is Flanders Brook Site 1. Now, Flanders Brook Site 1, you probably already figured out, is on Flanders Brook. But as you can see from the map, it's right next door, it's right next to Route 206. So you all know 206, again, better than most of the folks on the Highlands Council. 206 is hardly pristine. This is not, you know, this is not wilderness here. And yet this site, which we've got 2 years worth of data here, the first year it scored a 30, last year it scored a 27. And you can see the photo of the site there. Those are, for a site this far upstream, that's what I would expect to see. Now the Flanders Brook site is west of the dump, so the dump does not drain to Flanders Brook at all. It drains only towards Ledgewood Brook. That's kind of an important point.
Bill?
Yes.
Are you aware at one time, I don't remember how many years ago, Roxbury was discharging into this stream from their sewage treatment
From
plant?
the sewage treatment plant?
Yeah.
Yes, I think
Okay.
that's correct. I don't know where, I mean, you would know better than I. I'm not sure where on Flanders Brook it is.
It's a little north of this.
I think it is, yeah, that sounds,
Phyllis, I think.
and I
is
believe
across
that the
there.
reason this site was put where it was to ensure that it was downstream of there. The next site is the Drakes Brook site, number 1, which is on Drakes Brook. Downstream of the dump, we have 1 year's, this is last year's data. If you turn the next page, again, you can see a photo of the site. It says water quality Drakes Brook site number 1. That scored a 30 last year. You look at Drakes Brook site number 12. This is downstream of the last site that you just saw. This is downstream of the confluence of Flanders Brook and Drakes Brook. So this includes Ledgewood, Ledgewood Brook. So Ledgewood Brook, which comes out of the landfill, drains into Drakes Brook. Drakes Brook and Flanders Brook then come together just upstream of this site. This site has been around for quite a while. It's been around since 1996. Our program began in 94, so this is not one of our very first sites, but it's pretty close. And if you look at the water quality chart for this, this is what we typically see, and this is what I would not be surprised to see this for a stream in this location. You see the water quality's gone up and down, but it's stayed within a fairly narrow window. We had some difficult years in the early 2000s. That was a function of drought. We saw that dip on almost every single one of our monitoring sites. During the drought years, every site took a hit, and it took a while for the sites to recover. It took a number of years for them to recover, but most all of them had. We also saw that most of our sites, especially the sites in the Highlands, as opposed to those in the Piedmont, took a pretty significant hit during Hurricane Irene, or whatever it was, by the time it hit here, Tropical Storm Irene, as well as Lee, the one that followed immediately after that. Again, we saw what we tended to see, at least what we think that we've seen so far in the data, is that for flood events like Irene and Lee, almost all the sites, especially in the Highlands, took a significant water quality hit, but they recovered pretty quickly, much more quickly than they did from the drought. So you kind of see that here. You see the drop and things come back up. But again, routinely, the scores here, they've dipped down as low as 15, but fairly routinely they're between 21 and 30, which is what I would expect to see on a site like this. Slides are yours to keep. There are a couple other things for context that I'd like you to keep in mind. DEP monitored this location where we have our current monitoring site in 2001? 2007, sorry. In 2007. I know where I got the phone. And at that time, in 2007, it scored 21 on the New Jersey impairments. 24, sorry.
This is non-impaired.
Yes, 24 on the New Jersey impairment score. So that's 24 is non-impaired. 24 is not a 30. It's not in that 27 to 30 range that I would anticipate seeing. So I think, now with one, as I said, just that one data point, it's impossible for me to say this with any confidence. But I suspect that the fact that it was scoring a 24 is probably a function of its being impaired. You know, it was getting some impact from the dump at that point. But 2007 was before the dump reopened. Since then, we're routinely seeing these scores around 18, and it has not budged. So what we're seeing is absolutely an impairment. That impairment is a direct function of the dump. That impairment was not there before the dump reopened. It is there now. It has not changed in the last 3 years. If you go back and look at that last site, Drakesburg, you'll see most of the sites, scores change a little from year to year. This site, in 3 years, it's a little hard to see a pattern from 3 years, but the pattern I'm seeing so far is it ain't moving. It's not getting better. So why is this important? Well, first of all, it's in your community. There's a couple other things that are worth understanding. As you know, Ledgewood Brook drains into Drakesburg. Drakesburg runs into the South Branch eventually. The South Branch comes down to the confluence of the South Branch and the North Branch where they join in Branchburg, hence the name Branchburg. That's where the Raritan River proper starts. About a mile downstream of there is where New Jersey American Water and some other public water companies, utility water companies, pull the water out for the water supply. This watershed, our watershed, provides drinking water for about 1.5 million people, mostly outside of our watershed. There's a few folks in Hillsborough, but other than that, everybody else is outside of our watershed. You notice I didn't say anything about Spruce Run or Round Valley. Most folks don't realize there is effectively no plumbing. Those reservoirs have nothing to do with the plumbing. They are big storage tanks. The South Branch of the Raritan River is the plumbing for the water supply. There's no pipe from Round Valley or Spruce Run that goes to any of the water companies. None. The water goes into Round Valley, it's then gravity fed out of Round Valley back into the South Branch, goes downstream and is taken out. So this water in Ledgewood Brook is going to 1.5 million people. Now, I know that sounds like a ridiculous statement to make, but just follow the plumbing. That water is going to 1.5 million people. Now, it's being diluted as it goes, no question about it. But this is directly impacting drinking water for 1.5 million people outside the watershed. Now, those folks are downstream of us, right? I live in California, they're even downstream of me. So what do I really care? Maybe you don't.
That's the water right there.
That's, okay, exactly. That's Angela's water. We gotta be, so, plus, anybody with students in Rutgers, they're drinking that water. That water all goes to New Brunswick. The larger issue for us here today is that your basic drop of water doesn't know the difference between surface water and groundwater. Groundwater and surface water move back and forth. It doesn't happen all the time, it's not real fast, but they move back and forth. If you go out and look at the small streams in the summertime, during the summer months, when we haven't had rain in quite a while, and the streams are way down, and you're wondering, where's the water coming from? It's not like we have a snowpack here, we don't live in Colorado. So where's that water coming from? The water that you're seeing is what's referred to as base flow. That's basically groundwater. You're looking at the groundwater table. And that water moves, as you know, it goes to places. Wetlands are very important for recharging aquifers, but it'll move from surface water into the aquifer. So it goes from being surface water to groundwater, and it goes from groundwater to being surface water sometimes. It'll move back and forth. When I see these kind of impacts on surface water in a community, I am deeply concerned about what's happening to the groundwater in the community. Now, this is surface water results. I can tell you what's happening in Ledgewood Brook. I don't know what's happening with the groundwater here, but this would concern me very deeply. So my point, which I made initially, was there is a problem at the dump. There's a problem in Ledgewood. I can tell you with confidence that the impairment that we're seeing in the stream is a direct function of the dump. I cannot tell you what the impairment is a direct result of. Our protocol requires that when we see this kind of impairment 2 or 3 years in a row, we're supposed to go do chemical monitoring, which is what we should be doing now. So here's the challenge. If I'm downstream of a wastewater treatment plant, I got a pretty good idea what I should be looking for. If I'm downstream of a gas station, I know what I'm looking for. If I'm downstream of a dump, I got no idea what to start looking for. I have no idea what's in that hole in the ground up there on the hill. And the challenge is, we don't seem to be getting a lot of help from anybody else to tell us what we should be looking for either. In my opinion, either EPA or DEP should be insisting that a waste site, a proper waste site characterization be done, which means it's time to start digging some holes and find out what's in the dump, so that we know what we should be monitoring for. That hasn't been done. So that's, and I also think that as a community, you ought to be very concerned about the groundwater issues and be keeping a very close eye on those. Now, I should have said this up front, and I didn't. The number one concern is obviously the air issue. Hydrogen sulfide and whatever else is coming off the site. I'm the water guy, I'm not the air guy. I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, downplaying the air issues. I think that the air issues are paramount. But I know that you can't hold your breath very long without there being some real problems. I also know that you can't go without clean water for very long without there being serious consequences. And probably the second most serious thing after being able to breathe is ensuring that you've got clean water. So I think the air issue is paramount, but the water issue is also very critical. Anything else?
So we said that we should do a waste site
Yes.
characterization, but in addition to that, we also think that the EC should be encouraging regular testing of the surface water and the sediment in the Ledgewood Brook at that detention basin below the landfill itself and in the Ledgewood Pond. So regularly tracking what's coming out in the surface water.
Generally we're looking at biological. This is biological monitoring that we're doing primarily. So when it comes time to start doing some chemical monitoring, we're looking at samples as well as water samples.
More recently, it's come out that the cone-fill north and south landfills may be leaching the 1,4-dioxane in some community resident wells in Mount Olive. And you want to take up that?
Yeah, I'm concerned about what I'm reading in the paper now about what's going on with Conefill North. For those of you who've been around for a little while, Conefill North was also a landfill. It was closed and capped as a Superfund site. There was an article in the paper just this week that there's dioxane leaching out of that landfill into neighbors' wells. They're not sure, from what I read in the paper, whether this is something recent that they're just seeing now, or whether the ability of the lab to detect it has improved. So they're just, it may have been going on for some time, they're just able to detect it now. Either way, there's apparently dioxane coming off the site. That concerns me because, from what I understand, a number of the names that are associated with Conefill North are also associated with the Fenimore Landfill. And without, I haven't been through the records to see, I don't know that the records exist, but we ought to be looking to see if material that got shipped to Conefill North also got shipped to the Fenimore Landfill. I would be very concerned that that may very well be the case. And we need to look at that, which is another reason why a proper waste site characterization needs to get done on the site.
And I think this was done by the town, by the New Jersey Department of Health. The testing that was done at the Ledgewood Pond, as well as what they call the leachate pond, back in January 10th of 2013. And it shows everything that they tested for and found presences or absences of. But they weren't testing for 1,4-dioxane as far as I can tell. So you could definitely recommend.
So, questions? That was depressing, right?
I have a question. I think you can prove without a doubt that it's coming from Ledgewood Pond, from the Fenimore Landfill. If you go, open up back to map 1, where we tested the water, and I was part of the testing.
Mm-hmm.
And the dump sits in between these two streams.
Right.
This stream here is uphill. If we test that come early spring, and if it's
Okay.
up in the 30s, that means that the contaminant is coming from the bottom stream and the dump is floating downhill. So that's a definite way of proving that it is the dump. All we have to do, come early spring, test right uphill, upstream from it. And if that's healthy, that tells,
But I thought that upstream was the Fenimore site itself.
no. Fenimore sits in between here, right here. In
Right.
between the two streams. And downhill is this way. Downhill is this way. We go to the top of the stream and test it there. We could prove without a doubt, if that's healthy, that this portion of the stream and the runoff, which blends in right here, is what's causing it.
Yeah, I'm looking at that.
Right.
because
There's
Right.
Fenimore there.
Okay.
Right, so.
Well, what he's saying is,
Right.
the
If we go here.
Dump
the elevation
Oh,
consists
I will,
of this.
I will.
If I remember, I did,
Yeah,
at one point I looked at,
Yes,
I looked up groundwater flows in this area, and I think that they're to the southeast, if I recall correctly. I can double check that pretty
If we
easily.
test
They are,
this
Bill.
area right there,
They are.
right approximately this area right here, where the power lines are, that's uphill. That's way uphill from the
You're
landfill.
saying nothing from the landfill will be going
Right.
into that stream?
Nothing from the landfill. And if this is healthy, that proves without a doubt that,
Groundwater flows generally
that
run
public
this way.
access?
Well, we
Yes.
get access along the ground.
yes, I'll take you there. Thank you.
I'm just gonna play devil's advocate here though,
Sure.
because, you know, I'm involved with the stream monitoring, I have been, and test, but one thing that has been consistent for 3 years as well is that the site has been under construction. So it was a treated area where the trees were level. And then since that time, for the last 3 years, it's been, you know, under construction constantly. So when I've done it, or when I've been at the stream monitoring sites, one thing that has struck me is a large quantity of sediment,
Yes.
which, in being a layperson and not knowing a lot, but, you know, having built a house, I know that, you know, there's runoff a lot of times when there's construction, the soil's loose. So could part of this be caused by the construction as well?
The short answer is it could. As I said, you know, what I can say with confidence is that the impairment that we're seeing is a direct function of the dump, and almost certainly a function of the dump being reopened. Now, whether that is a function, whether the impairment is being directly caused by either something that was historically placed in the dump, you know, is there something down in there that's causing this impairment that got disturbed? I don't know. Is it the new material that was brought to the dump as part of the capping and so-called closure arrangement? I don't know. Is it simply a function of the construction? I don't know. There is a fairly significant, not huge, but a fairly significant buffer between the dump and the monitoring site. There's a couple hundred meters there that are in very good condition. I'm not surprised to hear that sediment is an issue. As I mentioned, as part of the chemical monitoring, we would certainly want to be looking at not just water samples, but sediment samples also. And I think that's critically important to sort out exactly what it is. We see other headwater sites with fairly high sediment loads that don't see this kind of impairment. So could it be something being carried with the sediment? Absolutely, it certainly could be. Is it merely the fact that there's sediment at this site? Could be, but I doubt it, because we don't, you know, we see that on South Branch sites. There's a fair amount of sediment that comes through there just because of the nature nature of that stream, especially the Highlands portions, carry a fairly good sediment load, and we don't see these kinds of impairments. I mean, we've got more work to do. I would like to be able to come to this environmental commission and tell you got a problem, and it's the, you know, it's the 1,4-dioxane. That's what's doing it. I don't know that.
Could I add
I
to
wish
that
it was
comment?
that simple. I really do. We're not there yet. I know you got a problem, and the primary reason we wanted to, well, there were two reasons. One is to be able to give everybody a chance to ask questions, and you're welcome to do that. But the critical issue is I was very concerned when I saw town council seem to indicate that there was not a problem here with water quality, and I heard the same message out of the Highlands Council and wanted to put a stop to it, because that is, regardless of what the direct cause is, there is a water quality problem here, and it is a function of that dump.
Yeah, Bill, I'm a
Yeah.
council person, and
Okay.
just to let you know, town council doesn't take this lightly. All right, we were extremely concerned about this, council fully aware. That's why, one of the reasons I'm here, not only am I a member of this commission for the past,
Forever.
something
More or
like
less.
that. Yeah, but we're,
Approximately.
this group is the one that did the original phase 1 testing with the DEP back in '06, when I was mayor. All right, we are concerned about the environment up there, we are concerned about the stream. One of my questions would be, what kind of sediment testing are you taking? Talking about on the banks, in the water itself?
Yes.
And you want to find, what are you looking for?
Well,
Any
that's-
chemicals, any
yeah.
metals? What are you looking for?
That is
What's in your
question
mind?
number one. What am I looking for?
Yeah,
Because
I mean,
if I don't know what to go looking for, I won't know if I'm going to find it, which is in part why the waste site characterization is so important. On some landfills, there are very good records of what was taken to the dump, or to the landfill. Others, there are not. The records here are a little spotty. So the challenge is knowing what to look for. Now, I would start by, Angela and I have gone through the data that came back from the testing that DEP did. There are a number of issues there that were of concern that I would definitely be looking for. The sediment testing, primarily the metals, those are things I would expect to see in sediment. I would expect to see the metals show up. The aluminum, but more so chromates and some of the other metal issues.
Some of them are toxic, nasty.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get it.
and they tend to show up in sediment. They tend to settle out.
Well, that's where they accumulate.
Yeah. But part of it is just figuring out what it is we need to look for. The short answer is I'm not sure yet what it is we need to be looking for.
Sediment testing is not something the Headwaters Association normally does, so.
No, I think that's something
Bring in a
that,
consulting firm.
I think that's something that I can talk to the town council about and get some sediment testing done. Harvey Klein is here tonight. Do you know Harvey Klein?
He does all our well testing for
Yeah.
us. I give him a lot of business. Good business, not the business.
I'm very happy that it's here tonight to hear this, because it is important to us. All right? I think I can convince the council that they have to go on with this kind of stuff and start doing the testing instead of know when, where. And maybe with your help, we can get into that right direction.
Yeah,
Just because I don't know a lot about this, I just have a question. What exactly gives it an 18 as opposed to a 30? Is it air, lack of air quality, oxygen in the water? Or what gives it an 18 as?
Yeah, I'll let Angela walk through the New Jersey impairment score, because
I'll give a
it's a
general summary.
fair, yeah, please, just a general summary, don't be the salt of that. It's a fairly complex
Okay.
protocol, but it's based on benthic macroinvertebrates, so it's based on water bugs. I mean, Angela calls them benthic macroinvertebrates. But there are certain benthic macroinvertebrates that are pollution intolerant, there are some that are not, and it's not all one or the other, there's kind of a scale. Some are more tolerant, some are less. Are there any fly fisher women in the
My
group?
husband is.
All right. Stoneflies, mayflies, caddisflies. Anybody who fly fishes knows stoneflies, mayflies, caddisflies. Well, there's a reason trout love them and that they do so well in trout streams, because trout streams are generally fairly pristine. And most, not all, but most stoneflies, mayflies, and caddisflies do not like pollution. They do very poorly. And they're typically the ones that disappear first. First when water quality gets bad. I'll let Angela explain it. Yep.
I can tell you, my father was a fly fisherman, and he used to love to fish the trout, especially the browns ones. When we moved from Dover to here, the brook goes in back of our yard, and he has to go out and have his smoke, right? He walks down by the brook, and he looks around, he goes, "There's fish down there." Well, now there's no fish down there. So I concur with what you're saying.
So I think Bill gave it a good intro, but basically, like he was saying, if you have your mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies, they're your excellent indicators of water quality. So if you find them there, it's a good, safe bet that the water's okay. But basically, the New Jersey impairment score is trying to assess the diversity of the benthic macroinvertebrates that are living in the stream and the relative abundances of the different organisms to each other. So you'd rather have a sample that's very diverse, and there's not like one organism that's dominating the sample. And so it's taking into account a couple different metrics, scoring them, and then adding them up, and that's how you get a score from 0 to 30. And I did bring a little stream monitoring report, little because it's short, and it kind of goes over. Yeah, it kind of goes over what Bill said here. There's little fact sheets about each site, and then at the end, what? Like with the actual data? No, but I can supply that. It does go over how the index was calculated, so I can leave this in your hands and you can get
I
that.
have a copy of
I don't know if anybody else knows how they
Benthic? Yeah.
I can send it to
And,
you.
yeah, and then macro, and then just
see us the
And they're on the, take the Reader's Digest version.
and there's different indexes too, you should know. That's just one.
Okay.
There's also another one called the high gradient macroinvertebrate index, which we're transitioning our data to, and it's actually a very good indicator for our headwater streams. It's more sensitive than the New Jersey impairment score. And everything that we were talking about with the New Jersey impairment score is validated by the high gradient macroinvertebrate score. In fact, sometimes it tells a bigger stories.
And Angela has the score sheets from each of the sites, so she can get you the specific breakdown for this site. It will tell you by name every single bug that was in there. So there's lots of good detail.
You're right.
That's it.
More details.
But you can kind of see how this. There is a formula,
Okay.
But, and
and once you see
No, they don't
the
make
different
sense.
families
It's just-
of vertebrates, and you can kind of see where. Yes, that's it right there.
And I've almost been holding my breath for this site because sometimes what's sustaining the score of 18 is just having like one, there's literally one specimen that's contributing to the taxa richness or the diversity. So like each year, if that one bug drops out, that score can definitely drop very soon. So 18 right now. We'll see what happens in 2015.
Whether
Last 2 weeks of
So what I would be interested to see, though, Jackie made a point that whole place was clear cut. And personally, I think that has a lot to do with it. That's only my opinion. They're supposed to be reseeding that this year with various grasses, but I don't know exactly. I'd be interested to see if those grasses helped. So this year is going to be, I think it's going to be iffy, but certainly the following year. 16, once the grass takes hold and is in place for a little while. I'd be really, I wish I could go forward right now and see that.
My only, yeah.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah.
I mean, what I'd really love to have is 30 years worth of data for this site, which we just, simply don't have. And I recognize that we've got some shortcomings because of that, but, we certainly will continue to monitor this site and continue to look at the data on a year-to-year basis and try to follow those trends as we see them. I hope that you're right, that a reseeding will rectify some of this. I've got two specific concerns with that. I definitely appreciate the concern about the trees all being cut down. As a water guy, my biggest friends are trees. There is nothing better in the watershed for clean water than a healthy forest. Trees are where it's at. So grass would not be my choice, but I understand, you can't plant trees on the cap. I get it. Right? Like I understand that there are practical limitations, but I'm afraid the grass isn't going to do for us what the trees were doing. But we'll see. We'll find out over time.
Hopefully we'll
So,
see what that is.
yeah. The only other thing I'm concerned about is we were still seeing, this place, again, it was one data point. But the data that DEP collected in 2007 suggests to me that this site was, shall we say, less than pristine before the dump was reopened. I think at that point, it's likely that we were seeing some impact from the dump already,
Well, the dump
before it was disturbed. before
Never
it was reopened.
properly capped. Bobby,
Well, no, it
Bobby
was.
knows,
You gotta look at the
You
time
walked it
schedule.
a
When the
number of
trees were
times.
cut,
Okay.
it was the first
Before
step
April.
in the construction.
Right.
But demolition didn't start for a year ago.
no, I'd let-
That means all they did was bring in garbage, garbage, garbage. So for the first 2 years, all you had was garbage. The third year, you had the construction, and they trenched around, built the road, and brought in some dirt.
That-
But you gotta look at the time
That was
schedule.
that was my counter, was that first year,
Yes.
the site actually received an optimal habitat assessment score based on the visual habitat. And so in that first year, there wasn't a big sediment issue, and it received a score of 18 still. So, and then it was in the subsequent years, it had declined because of the sediment and other factors to being suboptimal visual habitat assessment and still maintaining that score of 18. So,
But you raise a very good point, and
And
I
the
have-
trees were cut upstream from the stream.
Oh, yeah, I know, no, Bob, I've been up there many times, I know.
Okay.
But you were up there 15 years ago.
I was there,
And you know that dump
I
was
was
never
there yesterday,
capped.
hunting.
Can I say something?
well, this is.
Absolutely.
Excuse me,
Yes,
I'm sorry, I was
sure.
looking at him, but I've lived in town since 1960.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my husband's been here 3 generations. How long have you lived in town, Councilman?
30 years.
30 years, okay. I've
I'm
been
a
here
newcomer.
I've been here 55, okay? I swam in Ledgewood Brook. It's not Ledgewood Pond, it's not Ledgewood, it was actually Ledgewood Basin. The town employed my boyfriend in high school to be a lifeguard there. That was the swimming hole. I would swim in there freely in my junior high and high school years. And it was clean then. Clean enough for a 17-year-old to realize. It hasn't been opened, and they moved it because of the old dump. My husband and I are very active outdoors people. We hiked a lot over there. You could see the runoff in the streams coming down with the discoloration from the rust from things and whatnot else back in the 80s, the 90s. And what they've done with the dump, and I don't know if this Roxbury Environmental Commission, I've never been to one of these meetings, I don't know what this is all about, and I too want to come to more. I see a lot of younger people here that might not really have an idea of the history of this area. But what they've done by bringing in what's been determined to be at least some sandy material, which is so detrimental with the wallboard, is made a bad situation worse. And what they're doing now, what our state is doing, is just totally messing it up. And I'm very concerned also about the 1.5 million people that this water supply provides. Besides the air issue for the people that are close by. And I'm not even close by, I'm over in Succothon, not that I'm at the woods per se, but I'm just not at ground zero for the air.
Well, I'm glad to hear, it is nice to come to some place and talk about an issue like this with folks who actually know the area, because sometimes you spend time in training, it's a little challenging. Angela will tell you one of my pet peeves with this site is that it's called Fenimore Landfill, and as you know, it ain't a landfill. I went through this with the Highlands Council, it is a dump. It's a hole in the ground that people stuck garbage in, and as a dump, and there's no liner, and it was never properly capped, and never properly closed, and there's no inventory, and there's zero engineering thought that went into this, no planning. And there's a fundamental difference between a dump and a landfill, and this is not a landfill, it's a dump, and there are some real risks, because there's no liner. It wasn't properly closed, and it wasn't properly managed when it was running. They all need convention. That's the problem.
Well, for the old dump, there was chemicals dumped there in the old, and before what just happened in 2010, it was 85,000 gallons. I think it was 1,500 drums of some type of hair chemical. We have it somewhere.
Various things here.
It was nasty stuff that was dumped in there. It was like 1974-ish that we had found.
Well, we should talk about that. That's, like I said, we need to figure out what it is we're looking for, and that would be a good start.
There's quite a few vehicles buried underneath there too.
Yeah, there's vehicles, absolutely.
You know, the scary part about it is the DEP, in my opinion, has got two sets of rules. They got the sets of rules for something like this, and they got the sets of rules for the rest of us sitting in this room. And I'll give you a small example of that. My mother had an oil tank in the basement, or excuse me, in the ground, and it started to leak. At least we thought it was that was leaking, but it wasn't. It was one of the copper pipes that were in the basement. Oil comes on the floor. I had to call the oil company come up. They came up, the men in white coats and everybody else was there. And they blessed it. They said there's no problem because it came in the house. But if it was the oil tank that was leaking, 555-gallon tank, my mother probably would have lost her house, because if it was leaking in the ground, you got to go deep till they see no more and then some more. Well, to say what you just said, or to try to follow up on that, that's what they should have done up here. But obviously they're not going to go too deep down to China like when we were kids. They're obviously not going to do that. But that's the right way to do it. And they make and my mother would have been ruined because her house is only a small house and it's not worth all that much money. But the DEP was right there. You will. But they don't.
No, and I will confirm for you, the DEP does indeed have two sets of rules. So I suspect some of you in this room already know this, but when it comes to old dumps, landfills, there are literally two sets of regulations. There is a set of rules that apply to those that were closed or abandoned prior to, I've forgotten the date, but sometime in the 1980s, 84, 86, somewhere in 85. Okay, it's in that time frame. But those that were closed or abandoned sometime before the 1980s fall under one set of rules that are virtually non-existent. Those that were closed after that fall under a much more stringent set of rules. Your dump was abandoned prior to that date, so you fall under the significantly less stringent rules for landfill closure. So you're absolutely right. There are two sets of rules, and you can go find them. They're very clear that there are two sets of rules.
Environmental protection to me means environmental protection. And I understand about the two sets of rules,
Yep.
but environmental is the environment is the environment. And I don't know if the council gets it. Maybe they do. I don't think so. Environment is the environment. And we, our council, because they're our mouthpieces, right? They're listening to the DEP and they're saying, well, we're trying, but they're not trying hard.
Angela, the 2007 test that you had mentioned from the DEP, was that a stressor indicator test? That, or what?
I think they definitely referenced it in that stressor indicator report that was done, I think around that same time, and then it was updated, I think in 2009 or 2014. Like, it's definitely, that data point is sourced in that document.
Because there is another data point, but the DEP is refusing to release that. It's confirmed it's out there, they just won't release it.
I'm not sure if it's the same one or not. but
It's
this-
different, it's from either 2009 or 2010.
Okay, the only one that I know about was publicly available on Storette, and that's
Right.
how we were able to get the data.
Because I got a affirmative in my Oprah request for it, and then all of a sudden they came back and,
Copy that response?
uh-huh,
You guys
I have it.
above.
And then they denied it soon thereafter.
If they're hiding data, we'll go after them.
Yeah, when I looked for it in Storette, it is.
It's magically disappeared.
Yeah, we don't really have, we're gonna have to kind of wrap it up with this 8:45. I'm just kind of curious, have you presented these results to DEP? Since it's DEP protocol.
We have not
DEP is
sat
kind of
down
like
like this with DEP to present this to. We have presented it to the Highlands Council. DEP gets all of this data. Absolutely. So we haven't had a formal presentation like this, but we have, they certainly have.
They're changing their submission protocol, so they've had this data since 2013. Yeah, 2014. We're working with them in March to submit the data, and I'm meeting with people from the DEP.
One last question, please. What's the plan for the future? Are you just going to do some more chemical testing?
We will continue to do biological monitoring every year in June, from now until.
Can you schedule it
whenever.
for the upstream as well?
Yeah, let's talk about doing that this
Okay.
year. And we need to start doing chemical monitoring as well. We need to kind of figure out what the universe is.
I could assist
I am-
Angela on picking
Not to state
spots.
the obvious, but we're a nonprofit organization, so I wish I could just go out and test for every chemical known to humanity, but I can't, so I gotta figure out, we gotta narrow this down to a manageable universe before I start sending samples off to Murphy's lab to have a look at.
One,
We could start with what they found in the other dump.
but
Yes, yeah, I think a logical place to start is to go back and look at the issues Coneville North, I would expect.
I have a list of some of the dumpers.
If we saw similar issues here.
And I was told that one avenue for funding for all this testing, 'cause I'm sure it is expensive and we did it regularly, because Roxbury Township is in the Highlands region and you're in conformance, there's different grants and stuff that you can be using to do this testing.
And why haven't we done it? Because we haven't done any testing here, as I brought up to council the other night, since January of 2013. It's been 2 years since we did any water testing on Ledgewood
I
Basin.
don't think that's accurate,
That is accurate,
because I think
No, I
if
don't
you go,
think so.
if you go on the township website,
which I've been.
and it might be, I think it might be hard sometimes to find, because sometimes it's under Ledgewood Brook, Ledgewood Basin, Ledgewood Park, but I think there were some tests done in July 2014. if I'm
Not by the
correct.
township.
It's on the township website.
Yeah, we test, as Chris told you the other night, we've tested a number of wells in the area.
That doesn't count. The wells is not
Okay.
what he's talking about, right? The wells he's not talking about. He's talking about those different places, like he just said, not the
I
wells.
understand. We've tested a lot of wells around it, we have not found, and these are for VOCs and a number of other things.
Right, but we don't know what we're looking for either, Marty, unfortunately.
Look,
You know, I mean, it's just like Coneville North. It's 20 years later, and all of a sudden this stuff's coming out of there that's carcinogenic, you know?
I'd like to point out too that the Roxbury Environmental Commission, when RHA came and talked to us about their first testing in, I believe it was 2011, we said we would champion the Ledgewood Brook site, and we took on and funded, another site. So we've kind of tried to do what, baby steps or whatever, trying to.
That data point on the Flanders Brook is so helpful for telling the story. Without that data point that Roxbury helped to sponsor, we wouldn't be able to point, so look at one side of the mountain to the other.
And I think that we funded some chemical testing,
Yep.
along the way as well, based on your recommendations, so.
and
So-
Chris is
Can I
digging
tell you
into
something?
that.
When we were on the agenda last time?
The testing, I think there was some done.
I haven't seen it.
So I have one quick question to go along with what this gentleman over here just said, and that is, let's go cut to the chase for a second, because the people in this town are living with all the things that they're living with, and now that you pointed out to me, and I'm not gonna let Kathy sleep tonight, I'm gonna be talking to her all night long. And people downstream are drinking this water, okay? So my last question is, worst case, if we find out that it is the dump, and I believe it is, then what do we do to fix it? Because that's the bottom line, right? We have to fix it.
Yes.
So what do we do to fix it? And everybody keeps saying we don't have the money, we don't know this, know that, but I'd just like to know what we do to fix it.
Well, for the
DEP don't
record,
care,
If you,
town council don't care.
if you want the worst case scenario.
Yes.
I will present you the worst case scenario,
Okay,
in my opinion. In my opinion, the worst case scenario is you go to the feds and you demand that this be listed on the national priority list, just like Coneville North, and that it be treated as a Superfund site instead of an abandoned land.
so, Mr. Council
Now,
Member,
before you go there, I just want
listen
you
to
to
this, Mr. Council
understand.
Member.
I'm not recommending that that be your course of action. You asked for the worst case scenario, I gave you the worst case scenario.
That's fine.
If you deal with this as a Superfund site, you have probably bought yourself a 20-year headache.
We got it already,
I've
20-year
done
headache.
Superfund work in the past. There are Superfund sites that I started working on in 1996 that still have not been closed. Superfund, yeah.
Make a quick technical comment on that. This site, whatever name you wish to call it, would probably not qualify as a Superfund site because, as you know, and some of the people here know, Superfund only kicks in when there is no entity that claims ownership of or workings on the site. Since the DEP has taken over that site, the EPA will not take it from them as a superfund.
Not as long as not as
Right.
long as DEP is responsible
Correct.
for it, but that doesn't mean that DEP, well, anyways.
It's a minor technical point, but.
Well, yeah,
And that's,
Since they've got-
that's all tied up, in, as everybody knows, that's all tied up in court right now.
Yeah.
yes.
So who knows how that's gonna come out?
As a councilman, the taxes are due for that landfill soon. What is the,
He's not paying taxes, Bob.
right,
Hasn't paid
so
taxes since
is
day
the
one.
town gonna take it over?
No.
And Bill, you must be aware that Coneville South on Parker Road in Chester, people weren't able to drink their water for about 25 years, and they just got public water
Last
piped
year.
into them last year.
Yep.
I ride my bike by all of these places. We ride our bikes down by where you were talking about, down in central Jersey, where we went for a ride down there on an event, and we were looking at these little streams that we were riding by, and my husband and I thought they looked disgusting. We were like, oh my God, that is just horrible. And you're saying that you're comparing that to an 18 to what this looks like now. That scares me.
Yep.
So what has the council done in the last 3 years to help solve this situation? Or this group, the environmental group?
Who are you asking, Carl?
The environmental group, you guys, environmental group.
The environmental group doesn't act on this. They merely offer support to the council when the council asks for it.
Okay,
You
they've
have to
got,
go to a council meeting and ask the same question, which I know you've done about.
sir, you're a
times.
council member, right? You're a council member, correct?
You're
Is it
familiar.
your job as a council member that we pay your salary for, and you're on that board, you should be talking to them because you're our actual mouthpiece. You're sitting here, you should be the one going up there and talking to them. I will, I don't care what I ask them, I will, but I think you got it all wrong, Mr. Councilman.
I don't agree with you at all.
I know, you don't care though. Just like the rest of them, don't care.
Nobody cares, Carl.
I know, you're right. When somebody drops dead, somebody's gonna care.
Is this meeting adjourned?
Well, do we have anything else, any more business, commissioners?
Yeah. You guys haven't done anything. Okay.
I don't know when you're done here. I mean, the last thing is like,
Yeah.